Rain hammered the curb as tires hissed to a stop, and the door flew open. Lena Carter stumbled onto the slick asphalt, heart thundering. She saw two silhouettes under a street lamp, hands entwined. Ethan Carter said, "You were never meant to see this." Maya Brooks said, "It was already over." The words hit like broken glass. Wind bent the umbrella from Lena's fingers as thunder rolled close. She had cooked, saved, and forgiven, and now the street tasted like metal. Her phone lit with missed calls that meant nothing. She stepped closer, and the lamp carved faces into cruel clarity. Ethan would not meet her eyes. Maya did not release his hand. Lena said, "Tell me this is a nightmare." Ethan said, "I am sorry." Maya said, "We did not plan this." The rain made small rivers that carried her trust to the gutter. A siren wailed far off like a warning that came too late. Lena swallowed the scream and felt a door lock inside her chest. Morning crawled in gray and left the kitchen colder than night. Lena wiped the counter like it could erase memory. The kettle hissed and then went quiet. A photo leaned on the fridge and refused to fall. Daniel Carter called twice and texted once. Lena said, "I am fine." She was not fine. The house had the wrong echoes now, and every chair felt like an accusation. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger who knew too much. She opened the back door to air out the ache. A neighbor's dog barked, and then the street went still. Ethan's jacket still hung on the chair like a ghost with his posture. Lena said, "I will not cry today." The words were a dam with a crack. She poured tea and could not swallow. Somewhere a drawer slammed and she flinched at her own hand. Silence pressed until her breath slowed and held. Lena opened the laptop and the truth marched out in neat bubbles. Messages stacked like stones across weeks. She scrolled, and each line felt rehearsed by the universe. Maya wrote words that once belonged to friendship. "I need." Ethan answered with promises wrapped in lies. Lena said, "How many dinners did I cook while this grew?" The cursor blinked like a metronome for regret. A calendar entry hit a hotel name in plain sight. Wow. She hovered, and her fingers shook. She wanted the floor to tilt and throw the device away. The room hummed with the sound of the fan and her pulse. She took a screenshot without breathing. She saved a folder with a name that tasted like iron. Her chest burned and then cooled to ash. The laptop closed with a click that felt final. The car smelled like last week and nothing else. Lena folded herself behind the wheel and let the engine idle. She rehearsed the words, and every version broke. She pictured Maya's apartment stairs and the light that never worked. Her phone vibrated with Daniel again, and she silenced it. She said, "I need to see the truth looking back." The street rolled past in short breaths and red lights. Songs came on that belonged to another life, and she turned them off. The city pretended it did not know her. She parked beneath a crooked tree and watched the windows above. One curtain twitched like a heartbeat. Rain spots from last night still freckled the windshield. And go on, child. She counted to 10 and lasted to 8. The key clicked and the door answered with a hollow echo. Maya's hallway smelled of paint and time. Footsteps from a neighbor faded and left a vacuum. Lena knocked, then softer, then steady. The door opened a notch and stopped. Maya said, "You should not be here." Lena said, "We need to end the pretending." Air stalled between them like a glass wall. The chain lock scraped and surrendered. Inside, Muggs sat close like they had been planning to speak. Lena placed the phone on the table and let the screen glow. Maya looked, and her shoulders dropped. She did not reach for excuses. She reached for the chair to stand. Lena said, "Say it, and do not look away." Maya said, "I did this." The words folded the room in half. Somewhere below, a mailbox slammed, and the sound carried up like a gavel. Lena felt the floor find her feet again. Sunday morning, light crept across the living room like it was ashamed. Lena Carter stacked laundry and folded with care she no longer felt. The radio hummed, but no song could reach her chest. Ethan's coat still hung where he left it, and she pressed the sleeve like it might vanish. Her hand recoiled as if burned. Daniel Carter knocked once, then twice, and finally stepped inside. He said, "You do not have to act like nothing happened." Lena said, "If I stop moving, I will collapse." Daniel's eyes searched for words and found none. He hovered by the door like a guest in his own sister's house. The air smelled of detergent and stale rain. Lena sat on the floor, surrounded by piles of folded fabric that could not cover the truth. She whispered, "Everything I built is rubble." Daniel crouched and rested a hand on her shoulder. For a moment, Lena did not shake him off. The family photo album still sat heavy on the shelf. Lena pulled one down and dust floated like ghosts. She traced the smiling faces pressed into glossy paper. Ethan's grin beside hers felt cruel now. Daniel said, "Do you want me to take these away?" Lena shook her head. She said, "They are proof that I was not dreaming." Her finger paused on a picture of Maya at last year's barbecue, arms linked with Lena's. The betrayal burned even in frozen ink. Daniel sighed, "You gave them everything, and they gave you nothing back." Lena closed the book with a slow push. The sound was louder than thunder in the still room. She pressed the album to her chest and leaned against the couch. Silence gathered, heavy as stone. Daniel looked at his sister and wanted to break something for her, but all he could do was stay. The clock ticked louder than it ever had before. Lena scrubbed dishes until her knuckles reddened. Each plate clattered like a verdict. Daniel leaned on the counter, voice low. He said, "Do you remember how you carried him through grad school?" Lena laughed, sharp and bitter. "Yes, while he carried Maya in secret." The sink filled with suds that reflected fragments of light. Lena whispered, "I thought loyalty was our bond." Daniel said, "It was yours, not his." The faucet hissed like static, drowning the silence that followed. A cup slipped, and porcelain cracked on the tile. She froze, staring at the broken curve. Daniel bent to pick it up, but Lena stopped him. "Leave it," she said. The shards glittered like something sacred and ruined. Lena walked through the quiet park where children once laughed. Leaves shivered on branches, early autumn painting the ground. She sat on a bench, clutching her coat tighter. A family passed, and the sight of holding hands twisted her inside. Daniel sat beside her, silent until she said, "I gave years of myself, and it was not enough." He answered, "He was the one not enough, not you." Her breath fogged in the chill, each exhale heavy with grief. The wind tugged at her hair as though to loosen her hold on the past. A bird scattered from the path, startled into the gray sky. Lena's voice broke as she said, "What kind of blood betrays its own?" Daniel placed his hand over hers, a simple anchor in a storm that would not pass soon. Back at home, Lena entered the bedroom that still smelled faintly of Ethan's cologne. She stopped at the doorway, heart slamming against her ribs. The unmade bed looked like an accusation. Daniel hesitated in the hall, knowing this space was not his to enter. Lena stepped forward and picked up the watch Ethan had left behind. She whispered, "How do I erase a life built together?" Daniel said gently, "You do not erase it, you survive it." The clock ticked steady, merciless. Lena dropped the watch into a drawer and shut it hard. The sound echoed like a slammed door in her soul. She collapsed onto the edge of the bed, staring into nothing. Daniel lingered, torn between leaving her alone and staying to guard her silence. She said, "If I wake tomorrow, it will all still be true." Monday broke without ceremony, and Lena Carter sat at the desk like a witness on the stand. Emails stacked like thin bricks that could not hold a roof. A calendar ping announced a meeting she would not attend. Ethan Carter said, "We can talk tonight," and the message glowed like a match near dry paper. She answered nothing and opened the bank app. Transfers stared back with dates that mapped a separate life. Maya Brooks appeared in notes beside cryptic entries. Lena said, "So this is how promises travel." The heater clicked, and the room settled, as if bracing for impact. Daniel Carter texted, "Do you want me there?" She typed, "Not yet," and let the words anchor her for a breath. She printed statements and watched the pages slide out like confessions. Outside, a garbage truck lifted the week and crushed it into a new shape. Lena drove to the storage unit where they kept old furniture and new lies. The manager handed her a clipboard and did not ask questions that might spill. The metal door rolled up and dust lifted like a curtain. Boxes wore Ethan's handwriting, friendly loops that now felt like taunts. She cut tape and found hotel receipts folded inside a cookbook. She said, "You hid them where comfort lives." A scarf Maya once gifted slid out like a snake leaving a skin. Lena pressed the fabric to her palm and then let it fall. Her chest rose hard against the cold air. She stacked evidence in a plastic bin with a lid that clicked like a verdict. A distant unit slammed and echoed through the corridor. She shut the door and felt the lock bite as if it had teeth. At the cafe where she once studied with Ethan, Lena chose the corner with the chipped table. Steam from her cup rose like a ghost rehearsing lines. Maya walked in late, eyes rimmed but steady. "Maya Brooks said, 'I will answer what I can.'" Lena said, "Start with why." The room seemed to lean toward their voices and then pull back. Maya whispered, "He told me you were done with him long before you knew." The lie crawled across the table and tried to shake hands. Lena did not take it. She said, "He used my kindness as camouflage." Maya nodded and owned the damage with a quiet wince. A spoon clinked, and the sound was too loud for such a small metal truth. They sat with the weight, and neither looked away first. Lena returned home to the quiet that knew her name too well. She opened the bedroom closet and counted the shirts that no longer had a wearer. Ethan's cologne rose like a memory that ignored boundaries. She pulled a box from the shelf and found letters from their first year. Ink, bright with hope, refused to fade on schedule. Ethan had written, "I will be better," and the words mocked the air. Lena said, "You were better at pretending." She folded each letter into a new shape that fit the small trash bin. Daniel rang the doorbell and then used his key. He said, "I have the lawyer's number if you want it." She did not nod, but she did not say no. The bin filled with the soft noise of paper learning how to disappear. Night gathered early, and Lena arranged documents on the dining table like a battlefield map. Bank logs, messages, photos, and the scarf sat in rows. She breathed through the tremor in her hands. Ethan texted, "I am coming by," and the screen burned white. Daniel stood near the sink, silent guard in plain clothes. Lena said no more improvising. The clock ticked in clean, surgical beats. She rehearsed the questions that would not offer escape routes. Maya's voice echoed from the cafe, not asking for mercy, only admitting the wound. Lena said, "I will not bleed alone." Headlights swept the wall and then faded. The house held its breath and waited for the door. The night did not blink. The phone rang with a number Lena Carter had not seen in years. She froze before answering, heart already sprinting. Her mother's voice cracked with age and burden. Sarah Carter said, "I should have told you long ago." Lena whispered, "Told me what?" Silence dragged before words fell heavy. Sarah said, "Ethan is not just your husband, he is your half-brother." The air vanished from Lena's lungs, leaving only a scream that would not escape. She clutched the table edge as the room tilted. Daniel Carter stepped in, alarmed, and asked, "What happened?" Lena said, "Everything I believed is a lie." The kettle shrieked, ignored, until steam clouded the window like a veil. Her mother's sobs through the line stitched truth into her bones, and Lena could no longer pretend the betrayal ended with Ethan's affair. Lena sat on the floor, phone still in hand, trembling. Daniel crouched beside her, his face pale. She said, "How do I breathe when my blood betrayed me twice?" He tried to answer, but words died in his throat. Sarah Carter's voice broke through the line. "I was young, and I made choices that followed me. Lena wanted to throw the phone but pressed it tighter. Daniel said, "You deserve truth, even if it burns." Lena whispered, "He was family before he was a liar." The sentence shattered her chest again. The room spun and settled, leaving her staring at the cracks in the tile. She felt history folding on itself, the past writing over her present. Daniel reached for her hand, grounding her in silence. Later that night, Lena drove to her mother's small house at the edge of town. The porch light flickered like a guilty conscience. Sarah opened the door, her hair grayer, shoulders bent under years. Lena said, "Tell me everything." Sarah lowered her gaze and motioned inside. "I knew." The living room smelled of old books and lavender. A worn photo album lay on the table, open to a man's face Lena had never seen. Sarah said, "That is your father, not Ethan's." Lena traced the picture with a shaking hand. Sarah said, "Secrets rot the heart, and mine has been hollow too long." Lena's throat burned with questions, but only silence filled the space. The album spread before them like evidence in a trial. Sarah pointed to dates scribbled in margins. She said, "I should have told you after you married, but shame silenced me." Lena's voice cracked. "You let me build a life on poison." Sarah's tears fell onto the pages, blurring ink. Lena stood pacing the worn rug, fists clenched. She said, "You betrayed me before Ethan ever could." Sarah whispered, "I thought I was protecting you." The words dropped like stones into a dry well. The clock on the wall ticked with cruel indifference. Lena pressed her palm to her temple, trying to block sound and memory alike. Back in her car, Lena sat in the dark driveway. Rain began again, soft and relentless. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel and whispered, "I was betrayed before I even knew love." The windshield blurred with water, hiding the house behind her. Daniel's call lit the phone, but she let it ring. The betrayal had multiplied, wrapping around her like chains. She said to herself, "No wonder Ethan's lies cut so deep, they carried my mother's silence too." Her hands shook on the wheel, gripping as though it was the only solid thing left. She turned the key but did not drive. For the first time, the night felt endless. Lena Carter stood before the mirror, practicing words that would not break. Her lips moved soundlessly, rehearsing questions like blades. The house waited in silence, every corner a witness. Daniel Carter said, "You do not need to face him alone." She shook her head, voice flat, "This is my storm." The phone buzzed with Ethan Carter's message. "I will be there in 10. Time shrank, breaths shorter. Lena arranged the papers and photos across the table, lining them like a soldier preparing weapons. She whispered, "No more shadows." The ticking clock grew louder, swallowing thought. Daniel's hand touched her shoulder, steady but brief. She met her reflection again, and did not flinch this time. The storm she carried had teeth, and she was ready to let it bite. Headlights sliced through the blinds, and the front door rattled once. Ethan Carter stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room, posture tense. Lena said, "Sit." Her voice cut the air like glass. He obeyed with slow defiance, pulling at his tie. Daniel stood near the kitchen, arms folded, silent guard. Lena slid the photos across the table, one by one, each a nail in a coffin. Ethan said, "You went digging where you should not have." Lena whispered, "Truth does not rot in silence." The weight of her words hung heavier than thunder. Ethan exhaled, restless, his jaw twitching. The house felt smaller, every wall pressing inward. The air was alive with the crackle of years collapsing in seconds. Ethan leaned forward, palms flat on the table, voice low. "I never wanted you to find out this way." Lena's hands trembled but stayed firm. She said, "You never wanted me to find out at all." The silence that followed was jagged. Daniel's eyes never left Ethan. Ethan looked at the documents, his mask slipping. He muttered, "I did not mean for it to be her." Lena snapped, "You meant every word you wrote her." Her chest rose hard, but her voice was steady. He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled back as though his touch was poison. The air buzzed with betrayal, layered now with blood and secrets that reeked of rot. Lena rose suddenly, pushing her chair back with a screech. She said, "You stole my trust, my body, my bloodline." Ethan flinched but held her stare. His lips parted, excuses scrambling to escape. Daniel stepped closer, but Lena lifted a hand to stop him. Her tears brimmed, not of weakness but fire. Ethan said, "I never asked for this truth either." Lena's voice dropped to a whisper sharp as a blade, "But you lived inside it and let me drown." The room pulsed with fury, the ceiling light flickering under tension. A storm raged not outside, but within four walls. Every breath felt like the last before something shattered beyond repair. The silence cracked as Lena slammed her palm onto the table, papers scattering like birds startled from a tree. She said, "You will not twist this into an accident. You chose lies, you chose her, and you chose to let me live blind." Ethan sat rigid, veins visible in his clenched fists. Daniel's voice cut through, steady as stone. "It ends tonight." Lena's breath slowed, heavy but resolute. She said, "You do not own the pieces of me you broke." Her words landed final, like nails hammered into wood. Ethan stared at her, but the weight of truth left him wordless. The night held them captive in its stillness, sealing the end of what had once been called love. Morning arrived without triumph, only steadiness. Lena Carter opened the curtains and let cold light enter. Dust drifted like slow snow and settled on yesterday's ruins. Daniel Carter brewed coffee and watched her hands stop shaking. He said, "You slept some." She answered, "Enough to stand." She gathered files into a single binder, neat as a stitched wound. The house felt lighter, as if it had decided to survive. Daniel said, "Today can be about you." Lena said, "Today is about truth breathing without choking me." She boxed Ethan Carter's remnants with a quiet face. Each thud into cardboard sounded like a page turning. Daniel squeezed her shoulder once and stepped back. She said, "I will not let pain be the only architect of me." The clock agreed with its calm ticking, and the day began to hold. Lena sat across from a quiet office desk where a pen waited like a gavel. She placed the binder down and exhaled slowly. Daniel Carter said, "I will wait outside if you want." She shook her head and kept him beside her. She said, "I am ready to put my name on the news story." Papers rustled, and the sound felt firm, not cruel. She signed forms that would separate life from ache. Daniel whispered, "Proud of you." She answered, "I am not brave, just done bleeding." The room's clock ticked as if nodding. She closed the binder and the click sounded final. The fluorescent lights hummed steady and kind. When they stood, her spine uncurled one breath at a time, and the door opened into weather that did not threaten. At home, Lena laid a velvet ring box on the table and watched the light crawl over it. The silence was not hostile now, only wide. She opened the lid and held the ring as if it were a small moon. She said, "You circled me, and I mistook that for warmth." Daniel Carter waited in the hall and did not intrude. Lena placed the ring in an envelope with the key Ethan Carter, once called Lucky. She wrote 2 sentences that neither begged nor accused. She said, "I release what never protected me." The envelope sealed with a press that felt like breath returning. She stood taller without noticing it happen. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past and took the last echo with it. Lena drove to Sarah Carter's porch where wind chimes spoke in nervous vowels. The door opened before she knocked. Sarah said, "I do not expect forgiveness." Lena said, "I came for boundaries, not blame." They sat with tea that cooled untouched. The room kept every secret but no longer felt conspiratorial. Sarah said, "I carried fear until it carried me." Lena answered, "I will not inherit your silence." The words cleared a path neither had walked. Sarah's shoulders lowered, smaller yet somehow truer. Lena stood and said, "We can love, but we cannot rewrite." Sarah nodded, eyes wet but steady. When Lena left, the chimes sounded like punctuation, not apology. Evening arrived with a pale sky that refused drama. Lena walked the river path where city lights stitched a quiet seam. Daniel Carter matched her pace without words. She said, "I thought endings were explosions." He said, "Sometimes they are clearings." She breathed in air that did not taste like endings anymore. The water moved forward and kept its promise. Lena said, "I can rebuild slower than grief expects." Daniel smiled, small and honest. They stopped where the railing hummed with passing trains. She said, "I forgive myself for not knowing." The sentence fit her mouth like something earned. Night settled, not heavy, just present, and the path continued without demanding courage. The house was still, only the hum of the fridge breaking silence. Lena Carter sat at the table with an empty mug, her reflection faint in the window. She whispered, "Silence feels sharper than shouting." Daniel Carter knocked softly and stepped in. He said, "You do not have to stay here tonight." Lena shook her head, eyes on the dark glass. "I need to know I can survive this room alone." The clock ticked steady, every sound louder in emptiness. Daniel lingered, then placed his keys on the counter, leaving her a choice. The moment felt suspended, fragile as glass before shatter. Lena climbed into bed alone for the first time without ache filling every corner. The sheets were cold but not cruel. She touched the pillow beside her, then withdrew her hand. She whispered, "I can sleep in truth, not lies." The moonlight spread across the room like quiet mercy. She turned off the lamp and let darkness stay. A train rumbled faint in the distance, steady and unbroken. For the first time, her breath aligned with night's rhythm. Sleep came like a soft tide, not drowning but carrying her forward. The next morning, Lena walked through the market where voices tangled with scent of bread and fruit. She carried no weight but her own. A vendor smiled, offering apples, and she returned it without effort. She thought, "I am still here, still moving." The chatter around her felt like proof that life continued. She bought flowers, not for graves, but for the table waiting at home. She whispered, "I will choose what fills my rooms." The sunlight pressed warm against her cheek, and she did not flinch. Lena placed the flowers in a vase, watching petals spread color across silence. The room no longer accused her, it only breathed. Daniel Carter stepped in with groceries and said, "Looks like a new place already." She answered, "It feels like mine again." He set the bag down and did not press. They unpacked in quiet rhythm, the sound of jars and bags, soft and ordinary. Lena realized healing was not thunder, but small steps stacking until they built a new foundation. She touched the flowers once more and smiled faint. That night, Lena sat by the window with the phone in her hand. She scrolled to Ethan Carter's number, but did not call. She whispered, "You will not have the last word." Instead, she deleted it, the screen glowing empty. The silence afterward was not hollow, but whole. She leaned back, watching stars peek through drifting clouds. She said, "Alone is not the same as broken." The words lingered, her own now. The night closed gently, carrying her story into tomorrow without fear.